Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Denmark once again, and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. Now, these guys were one of the first Danish craft breweries that I discovered when I moved over here to Scandinavia, and I think it's fair to describe this brewery as a very solid all-round brewery. Back in the day, they were known for their big beastly West Coast IPAs and the big Imperial Stouts, but in more recent times they've been doing quite a few different things. You can get some really good hazy IPAs from them these days, some nice lagers, and of course they still have the old school West Coasters and Imperial Stouts as well. So definitely a Danish brewery that I would recommend you check out regardless of what you like. Just try a style that you enjoy from them and I'm pretty sure you will agree it's a good quality beer. But the one we're going to have a look at today is a sub-style that I don't think I've had from this brewery before, and it's also a sub-style that I don't get to review on the channel all that often. So that was one of the main reasons that this beer kind of caught my eye, if you like. So I have to say I'm very curious to see what it's going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then we are going to head to the Danish capital Copenhagen on Sjælland. We're going to go to Kastrup in the south of the city to be specific, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Amager Bryghus. So this particular beer is called NosferRyetu. It comes in at 7.5% ABV, and this one is a kind of rye stout, I guess we could say. But you could probably also say that this beer is an export stout or multigrain stout, as Amager Bryghus are labelling it on the can. But yeah, curious to see what this is going to have in store for us. We've had many nice imperial stouts from Amager Bryghus over the years, so I'm curious to see how one of their lower alcohol offerings turns out. But yeah, been a while since I reviewed an Amager beer as well, so let's crack on with this one and see what it has in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Amager Bryghus before, and we will no doubt add some more to that list at some point in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and do make sure you check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You will find this one, of course, in the Danish playlist. So yeah, let's crack on then and chat a little bit about Amager Bryghus before we taste the beer. So Amager Bryghus, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Kastrup in the southern part of Copenhagen on Sjælland in Denmark, and these guys are probably one of the best known Danish craft breweries. But the company was started back in 2007, in April of 2007, by two friends, Morten Valentin Lundsbak and also Jakob Storm, and these guys had been avid homebrewers for a number of years. But apparently in school, the pair were forced to do a chemistry and physics project together, and so they wrote about the fermentation process that went on in beers. But both, this kind of stuck with them for a number of years, and they started homebrewing after that, but they both went on to gain their brewing diplomas from the Scandinavian Brewing School in 2008, and the company has since gone on to become highly decorated. These guys are one of the most decorated craft breweries in Denmark. But the first brewery they had was located in Tombu in the southern part of the city, and they've just been constantly expanding over the last few years. They had to buy a whole new brew kit in 2011, which took their capacity up to around 250,000 litres of beer per year, but they managed to actually expand to around 400,000 litres of beer per year at capacity in this first brewery. But they moved to a new site closer to the airport in 2018, which doubled their capacity even further. So these guys are brewing in excess of 800,000 litres of beer per year now. But they opened up their tap house bar in Copenhagen city, right next to Nørreport station, in March of 2019, and then soon after that they followed with another bar in Bryggen, which is supposed to be very nice. I do need to go and check out that tap room at some point as well, but I have filmed actually with Peter, Master of Hoppets, in the Amager Bryghus tap room. But yeah, these guys, I think that's everything we need to kind of say about the history of the brewery, but they are, as I say, one of the most established Danish craft breweries. In my opinion, the Batch 1000 West Coast IPA, at the time when that was released, that was one of the best West Coast IPAs that had been produced in Europe. Herr Fredriksson is another classic beer from these guys. Arctic Sunshine, or was it Arctic Sunstone? I forget. That was also very good. Winter in Bangalore was an awesome one. as well. Yeah, lots of the old West Coast IPAs were really nice. The Bastard Princess, their first hazy IPA, was also a very, very good one. But yeah, as I say, a very, very solid brewery all round in my experience, and one of the Danish breweries that you have to check out if you get the chance. As of September 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced around 340 different kinds of beer, and like I said, just yeah, very solid all-round Danish brewery. But that is all I can really tell you about Amager Bryghus for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that they've done. And you can check out some of my older reviews as well, when they still had the big half-litre bottles that they used to do. So yeah, let's crack on and have a wee look at this one then. So as you can see, artwork on this is once again very, very nice. Yeah, it also has a little bit of a blurb on there, which we'll look at in a minute. You can see black top on the can, as we often get from Amager Bryghus, and there you can see at the bottom of the can, this is the kind of modernised Amager Bryghus symbol. I do miss when they had the Danish flags on these actually. I quite like the fact that they said, oh, this is a product of Denmark. I think that's really cool in the European Union, is to show what country the beer is actually from. But anyway, like I said, this is the NosferRyetu. It's a 7.5% export stout, I guess we could say, but they're calling it a multigrain stout. And the blurb on the side here says, this was a beer made for Notbox's beer pit, so we wanted something metal to back it. Since here in Denmark people are obsessed with rye, we thought a multigrain stout with a rye emphasis would be very appropriate. The extra sticky stuff in the malt bill just being there to make a tricky mash even trickier. Thrash playlists are a thing of in our own production facility, and Coroner's NosferRyetu conveniently started playing at some point during the brew day, which steered the beer's name in this direction. And who can think about anything Nosferatu-esque without memories of this German horror masterpiece? So consider blasting the aforementioned instrumental song and queuing up the movie while you put this baby to chill. Think of it as a trip back to a time before vampires were glittery, stouts didn't contain unnecessary pastries, and you could handle a mosh pit without thinking you'd need hip replacement surgery. So yeah, I always enjoy the wee blurbs that Amager Bryghus put on their beers. But the malt base in this one is Pilsner, roasted barley and black malt, Cara Munich 2. It's also got some rye malt in there and some Cara rye, some wheat malt as well, choco wheat and oak smoked wheat as well, which should be quite interesting. Some oats, and the hops in this one are Centennial and Columbus, and it uses a UK ale yeast strain. So yeah, this should be quite interesting. But yeah, 440ml can. I believe I bought this one at the Beer Hive in Amager in Copenhagen, which is a shop that you really need to check out if you get the chance. But yeah, let's crack this guy open and see how we get on. The NosferRyetu, a multigrain stout, 7.5% ABV from Amager Bryghus in Kastrup in Copenhagen in Denmark. Let's see. So the head on this one, I'm going to say, this is going to be a little active. You can see there's a bit of stuff come out of this one just as we've opened up the can. But yeah, we'll just pour it carefully and see what we can do. Should be alright as long as we're kind to it. So, there we go. We are getting a nice head, but as I say, if we're kind to it, it should be alright. I think we'll maybe just leave it at that for the moment. I think, yeah, we've maybe got about 2/3 of it, maybe 3/4 into the glass just now. But yeah, so as you can see, this beer looks pretty damn nice. So you can see the head on this one is poured to be a nice finger, I would say, of a dark tan head. Just look at that. That looks very, very nice. Lovely, lovely looking head there. But yeah, you can see the colour of this one is pretty much as you would expect. Lovely dark sort of ebony rosewood colour. If we shine the light through it, it does have a little bit of that kind of Coca-Cola Pepsi Max coloured edge to it. One or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there, and there are a few little sediment particles floating around in this one. This beer has actually been sitting in my fridge for a little while. I think I've maybe had this one, I don't know how long I've had this one, to be honest with you. I think it's been since about April or something like that. It was before the summer anyway that I got this beer, and I just never got around to to reviewing it. But anyway, so yeah, in terms of what you would expect from a stout of any description, this colour is pretty much fitting. A lovely dark ebony rosewood colour. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on one, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, the length of your wort ball is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do, or any adjuncts that you put in, can affect the colour of the beer as well. But when it comes to black beers like stouts and porters, it's a little bit more difficult to get anything from that, I would say. But yeah, you can see the head has just faded away to be a nice kind of thin foamy layer on the beer now. But yeah, it looks absolutely great. I like how this goes together, but lovely looking beer. Let's have a little look at the aroma then and see how we get on. I don't think we need to say anything more about the appearance of this beer. Yeah. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, aroma wise, this is pretty awesome. It actually reminds me of it was called the Plain Dark beer from New Barnes Brewery in Edinburgh. It really reminds me of that, come to think of it. And New Barnes Brewery in Edinburgh are one of the ones that I would really recommend that you check out if you get the chance. They've got some lovely pale ales and lagers and things like that these days. Just lovely brewery. But yeah, this one really reminds me of that. This is a proper like old school English stout, this one. Yeah, I think this is going to be quite interesting. Lovely big bready base, good little bit of chocolate and sweetness and things to it, a little bit of fruit, a little bit of hop. You can't ask for much more than that from a beer that I guess we could call an export stout. Let's break the aroma down though a little bit more and describe it for you in depth. So, the backbone of the beer, it's got a lovely little bit of a roasty, kind of toasty black malt bread crust in the backbone there, but I would say that takes a bit of a back seat to everything else. So yeah, you've got that roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust in the backbone there, but on top of that, there's a lot of nice kind of brown rye bread in there, and you would expect that. There are one or two little elements of a kind of woody, and there's a woody and nutty undertone to this one. You do also get a nice little bit of that kind of leathery, caramelised brown sugar. There's some sweet caramel to it as well, but also a little bit of a more kind of toasty caramel. Yeah, so a little bit of oily caramel, toasty caramel, some McVitie's digestive biscuits as well. And there's a wee bit of a kind of chocolatey note to it. Like I'm getting a mix of kind of milk chocolate and I'm getting a little bit of a milk chocolate and a little touch of darker like cocoa nibby chocolate coming out of this beer too. So yeah, aroma wise, I think this goes together very, very well. Yeah, the malt, I have to say, you can smell this is quite a complex beer, and we've had some really awesome imperial stouts from Amager Bryghus over the years, but in terms of complexity of the aroma, this is up there with them, which is quite interesting. You've got I mean, how many different malts did we have in the malt base of this beer? So it was Pilsner, roasted barley, black malt, Cara Munich, rye, Cara rye, wheat, cocoa wheat, oak smoked wheat, and then oats. So yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 different kinds of malts in this one. So that makes sense, and that's that's it. I mean, Amager Bryghus are one of the breweries I would always say they're quite, when it comes to building up their malt bases, they're quite comprehensive with it. And I, as you know from watching the channel over the years, I'm a bit of a sucker for a good malt base, and this one smells absolutely lovely. Sweet caramel, toasty caramel, little bit of biscuit, little bit of a kind of milk chocolate in there, I would say, but also a little bit of a more kind of dry cocoa nibby note, lots of kind of brown rye bread, little woody and nutty undertones, and then also a nice big roasty toasty black malt character in the backbone for this one. But it really smells like quite a sweet and bready stout, this one, an old school English export stout, this one. It really reminds me of the Plain Dark beer from New Barnes Brewery, actually, that we've had recently. I think that's everything we need to say about the malty base just now. We're going to get a lot more out of this in the actual flavour, of course, I'm sure. But on the hoppy side of things, there's a good little bit of earthiness to it, and it's quite a smooth and deep earthiness, I would say. A little touch of herbal quality too, and you're also getting little elements of floral, and you're getting little elements of floral and grassy character to this beer as well. The green component is actually quite oily when I think about it, to be honest with you. So yeah, I like how that goes together in this beer. There is an element of a kind of chocolate brownie vibe to this beer. There's a bit of a chocolate brownie note in there. Some nice kind of there's a bit of raisiny sharpness, but there's also a kind of more oily plum and a little bit of a blackcurrant, blackberry sort of thing to this one. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together, I think, is very, very nice. So yeah, quite an oily, fruity character, then a little bit of that kind of like muffiny, chocolate brownie type note underneath it. But the fruits are actually quite boozy and cakey in this beer, I would say. So yeah, I think that's everything we really need to say about the aroma of this one. But I think we should have a taste of it and see how we get on. So yeah, this one is the NosferRyetu, 7.5% export stout, I guess we could say, from Amager Bryghus in Copenhagen in Denmark. You can see we've got the rest of it into the glass now. Let's have a taste of this and see what we're going to get. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Lovely smelling beer, this one. Oh yeah, that is quite nice, I have to say. It's actually a lot more roasty and toasty in the flavour than the aroma was giving you the impression that it was going to be. But then it mellows out really nicely, this one. So yeah, you've got a nice roasty toasty impact on this beer. It mellows out, and it's actually quite a sort of silky stout in a lot of ways, but it has this nice it really is like an old school English stout. This one, it's like an export stout. This beer really does remind me of plain dark beer, as it was called, from New Barnes Brewery in Edinburgh. It really is quite like that, but it feels a little bit kind of thicker, almost a little bit thicker and a little bit more creamy. But as I say, I really like how this one goes together for sure. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, lovely beer, this one. So big thumbs up to Amager Bryghus for this. And one thing I did notice, I had a little look at this beer on Untappd because I'm always curious of what rating it gets. This one had like a 3.7 or something like that, and to be honest, I would say it's not that good, or it's not fitting for this beer. This beer is better than that, and this is why I always say you should rate beer with a bit rate beer and Untappd and things like that with a pinch of salt, because this is more of an old school, sort of English export stout. It's not one of these big sweet pastry sort of things. It's not, it's not meant to be one of these stouts that absolutely blows the head off you. This is more along the lines of what an old school stout was back in the day. So yeah, you find this with Untappd. If it's not a big kind of juicy smoothie sour, or a beast in New England IPA, or like a sweet pastry stout, these days it's quite difficult for beers to get such high ratings on Untappd, in my experience. So something like this that should be appreciated more for what it is rather than as part of the big picture. I think that's one of the places where Untappd falls down a little bit, because this beer, for an old school English stout, I think is really nice. So yeah, bit of a shame with this one actually that it's not better thought of. So yeah, it really is a nice beer, this one. I like this. So let's try and break it down for you a wee bit. and just describe it a little bit more. So, and I will say the malt base in this has considerably more complexity than the aroma. So, or than it lets you know in the aroma. So the backbone of the beer, you've got a nice roasty, toasty, well-fired bread crust backbone there. On top of that, you get a layer of like a really toasty brown bread, and within that, I think this beer does have a little bit of a smoky character to it, and you can detect that just above the kind of bread crusty layer of the beer. But on top of that, you get the more you can feel the sort of sweet rye bready base, and it's actually it's kind of airy at the same time. But yeah, roasty, well-fired bread crust, a slightly more dense brown smoky bready layer, then the sweeter rye bread is just sitting on top of that. Toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of a nutty and woody character out of the beer in the base, which is quite interesting. But you also have on top of that kind of rye bready layer, you start to get some of the other things going on in this beer, and this beer does get more and more bitter toward the end of the palate actually, which is quite interesting, or toward the back of the palate I should say. So yeah, on top of that rye bready layer, there's a little bit of a kind of leathery brown sugar character to this one, which is interesting. So you've got a wee bit of that there, but toward the back of that middle third of your palate, you start to get some of the chocolatey notes out of the beer, and it's actually like a really a 90% cocoa chocolate. It's got quite a lot of bitterness to it, and as I say, in the back third of your palate, the bitterness of this beer really does build. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. As I say, on top of the brown bread, at the back of that middle third of your palate, you get the more kind of you do get that more roasty, toasty, how do you say, you do get that more roasty, toasty, chocolatey note out of the beer as well. You've also, on top of that, say, leathery brown sugar, and in the dead centre of your palate, you can feel there is a little bit of a straight up sweet caramel there. This beer is only 7.5%, so it's not the most, it's not the most boozy of imperial stouts, but actually if you tried this one you might think it's heavier than it is. But yeah, as I say, in the dead centre of the palate, you've got a sweet caramel there. As you move further out from that, you do get a little touch of a treacly molasses sort of thing. And as I said earlier, you've got that roasty, toasty, brown sugary layer there. But yeah, toward the back of that middle third of the palate, it is more about that kind of 90% cocoa chocolate. It's really interesting for sure. And the more that you drink of this beer, and the more your palate adjusts to it, the sweeter it gets. But yeah, it's really nicely done, this one. Like I say, it reminds me of the plain dark beer from New Barns in Edinburgh. But I think that's everything we need to say about the middle third of the palate then. The back third of the palate, like I said earlier, the roasty, toasty, bread crusty backbone gets a lot stronger and a lot more bitter on the back third of the palate. On top of that, you get a little touch of the kind of smoky bread layer that we talked about earlier as well, but you can feel that rye bread character that this beer has is a lot taller. And the interesting thing about this is this has got quite a bit of wheat in it, and it's also got a little bit of the oaty character. You can feel it to an extent, but it's not as obvious in this beer as it is in some of the other ones, to be honest. I think you can maybe, within it's probably just adding to the density of the bread. And in fairness, in the middle third of your palate, you do get a little bit of an oaty smoothness out of it the further into the aftertaste you go. But like I say, on the back third of the palate, you can feel that nice, tall but dense brown bready layer, and then on top of that, you can feel there is just a little touch of that kind of wheaty, bitey sort of thing. But the chocolate, the 90% cocoa chocolate, really mixes in that border region. But above everything else in this one, there's a kind of airy, there is a little bit of a kind of more airy brown, there is a bit of a more sort of airy Yeah, sort of. There's a slightly airy, kind of crackery, wholemeal brown bread note there. So on the back third of the palate, the flavour is definitely taller, and as you come further forward, it just condenses down as you go into the middle third of the palate. It's a really interesting beer, this one. It's a proper old school export stout, but kind of bordering on a Russian imperial stout in a lot of ways. Hmm. But yeah, it is nice, this one, for sure. And it gets sweeter. Your palate adjusts to this the more that you drink of it, of course, as well. So, yeah. I think that's everything we need to say about the malty and yeasty side of the beer. Let's focus on the hoppy side of things. So, back corners of the palate, you get a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, it gets a little touch herbal, and that kind of smoothness spreads along the sides of the palate, but you get a little bit of an almost kind of floral note just on the front kind of corners of the palate there, which I do enjoy. But round the front curve of the tongue, it's a little bit lighter and more. It's a little bit lighter and more grassy as well. So it's got a little bit of that oily, grassy note to it. Was it Centennial that was in this, if I remember right? The Centennial and Columbus. That kind of makes sense because yeah, the floral notes that you get in this beer give you a little bit of spice, and you know that is what Columbus is known for. So you get a little bit of that floral spice and a bit of a kind of wetter, grassy note round the front curve of the tongue. Let's focus on the front third of the palate then. So, the front third of the palate of this, you actually notice it's quite sweet in some ways, which I think is quite nice. So the border region between the front third and middle third of your palate, you get a little bit of a brown bready build up there. It's a bit of a slightly sweet rye bread. Then the base of that front third of your palate again is kind of smooth and rye bready too. But then on top of that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And yeah, this one's actually quite sharp in its fruity character. So when you take it in, there's definitely a little bit of that raisiny note. So yeah, there's a little bit of that raisiny note there, but then further down from that, you get a more kind of juicy, plummy character in the base of the fruit at the back of that front third of your palate is a more kind of juicy sort of figgy sort of thing. But as you move further forward, it's got more of a, you do start to get more of a kind of black curranty base and a black berry character on top of that. So yeah, the way that this goes together is quite interesting. So yeah, raisins, plums, bit of fig underneath, and then you've also got that black currant and blackberry sort of thing just sitting on top of it. So the fruity side of this beer, I think, is quite nice. Yeah, so gets a thumbs up from me in that sense. It's actually quite a wet and slightly sharper fruity character. I don't think we need to say anything else about the flavour profile of this one. It's actually a very complex stout, this, which is nice when you consider it's only 7.5%. But let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So for me, it's kind of top end to mid bodied. The carbonation is quite smooth. It's got a good little bit of an oily slickness to it, this beer. In terms of its IBUs, I think it's fairly high. I think this must be like a 70-80 IBU stout, this one. And some of that's coming from the hops. The Columbus, of course, is giving you a bit of the spiciness, but you know, the roasty, toasty black malt and the smoky malt are giving you a lot of dryness. So you maybe in this beer you can conflate dryness with bitterness, but definitely some of the bitterness is coming from the malt base and some of it's coming from the hops. But yeah, the malt base has got roasty toastiness, it's got smoothness, it's got density, and it's also got a bit of sweetness in there as well. And you've also got that little touch of sharpness and juiciness from the fruits in this beer too. But yeah, I think about 70 or 80 IBUs. I think they usually tell you on the Amager cans. No, it doesn't on this one. I'm pretty sure it used to. It used to tell you in the little ingredients list that they had on the side, but apparently not. But yeah, this is a really nice kind of old school stout, this one, and I think it's definitely worth trying this to compare it to some of the other ones that Amager have done in the past. But yeah, it really reminds me of the plain dark beer, as it was called, the big export imperial stout from New Barnes Brewery in Edinburgh. So yeah, this one gets a thumbs up from me. It's cool to see that Amager can really do It can give you the same level of complexity in a lower ABV stout as they can with some of the big boys that they do. So yeah, I'm quite happy with this one. But yeah, and NosferRyetu I think is a very good name for this. It really is a big kind of rye leaning stout, this one. You get a lot of nice graininess and stuff out of it, but definitely a roasty toasty rye leaning export stout, this one. So yeah, give it a go and see what you think. But once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Amager Bryghus as well. We will no doubt return to these guys in the near future. But in the meantime, yeah, thank you for watching. Check out my social media, check out theirs, have a go at NosferRyetu, and have a go at some of the Amager Bryghus beers if you haven't already. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.